In a quiet neighborhood where families lived with pride and peace, trouble didn't knock, it roared in. 6 men came to intimidate, to divide, to silence. But what they didn't know was that one man on that block had faced worse in deserts and war zones. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy, but when hate came to his doorstep, Marcus Tate stood up and everything changed. It began like any other afternoon on Winfield Avenue. The sun baked the pavement, children laughed as they hopped between chalk-drawn boxes, and the smell of barbecue drifted lazily from backyards. People greeted each other not because they had to, but because this neighborhood tight-knit, worn but proud, had survived too much to forget how to be human. Marcus Tate sat on the top step of his brownstone, a styrofoam cup of sweet tea sweating in his hand, heavyset, calm, and seemingly uninterested in anything but the breeze. He looked like a man who hadn't moved much in years, but those who knew Marcus knew better. His stillness wasn't laziness. It was discipline. He wasn't watching the kids. He was protecting them. The peace shattered like a pane of glass under a steel boot. A caravan of lifted trucks rolled onto the block. 6 men got out white, loud, covered in symbols that didn't belong here. One had a Confederate flag stitched into his sleeve. Another wore a skull emblazoned hat. They carried themselves like a conquering force, swaggering, smirking, oozing something darker than ignorance. It was the kind of presence that didn't announce itself, it invaded. They laughed at the music thumping from a teenager's speaker. One bumped into old Miss Darlene, knocking her grocery bag into the street without so much as an apology. Another spit on the mural painted after the last community vigil. Marcus didn't move. One of them camo shirt, overconfident eyes locked onto Marcus. "Big man, just chillin'. Huh? Watching the world burn from your little porch throne." Marcus took a sip of tea and didn't respond. That silence was more dangerous than shouting. The man approached, fists clenched, waiting for permission to explode. "You people think this is your block. We're just here to remind you who built this country." Yet still nothing. The man swung, sloppy, wide. Marcus didn't duck. He stepped aside. The punch missed. And in one smooth motion, Marcus grabbed the man's wrist, twisted, and sent him face first into the sidewalk. It happened so fast. People weren't sure it even happened at all. Another man rushed forward. Marcus swept his leg and dropped him without a word. The third drew a knife. That was when the air turned electric. Marcus took one step forward and struck the knife from his hand with surgical force, then dropped his knee onto the wrist, the sound of bones snapping muffled only by the collective gasp of the crowd. The remaining 3 men backed away. One ran. The others stumbled, dragging their wounded comrades toward the trucks as sirens wailed in the distance. But the story didn't end there, because this wasn't a random attack. Marcus knew patterns. These men didn't just show up. They had scouted the block before. Their gear was too coordinated, their language too rehearsed. It wasn't hate, it was strategy. When police arrived, they were quick to listen, especially to the footage from half a dozen cell phones. Marcus gave a statement, brief but clear. "It won't stop here," he warned. That night, someone tagged a local corner store with a swastika and the words, "Stand down," but the block didn't. The next morning, Marcus made a call to an old contact. Back in the day, he had served in Delta Force, Black Ops, the kind of missions that got redacted before they were even written down. He still had friends in the shadows, people who owed him, people who knew how to dig. The intel came fast. Those 6 men were connected to a fringe, domestic network trafficking weapons, testing response times, mapping out vulnerable neighborhoods. Winfield was a test run. Marcus didn't wait for bureaucracy. He assembled a team, not soldiers, but citizens. Jalen, who ran the barbershop, Tyra, a former prosecutor turned activist, Rosa, a retired hacker with a moral streak. Together, They built a wall the enemy couldn't see. Street cameras, secure communications, legal channels, neighborhood patrols, school protection plans, all within the law, but layered with a quiet message: you may walk here, but you don't own us. 2 weeks later, federal agents raided a storage unit connected to the same group. Inside, they found stockpiles of military-grade weapons, forged credentials, and surveillance footage of Marcus's block. The story went national. But Marcus refused every interview. "It's not about me," he said. "It's about everyone who stayed standing when we were told to kneel." Then came the mural, painted overnight by a local artist. It showed Marcus not mid-fight, but seated calm, watchful, with children in the background and rays of light behind him. Above it, the words, "We hold the line." It wasn't just paint, it was truth. Weeks passed. The threat stopped, but the strength remained. The block was different now, more united, more aware, more alive. People who had once nodded politely at each other now shared meals. Strangers became allies. Fear turned into resolve. One evening, a boy no older than 10 approached Marcus. "Were you scared?" Marcus nodded. "Of course." Then, "Why didn't you run?" Marcus looked at the boy, eyes soft but certain. "Because the people who do this stuff, they don't want our strength. They want our silence." The boy nodded, then sat beside him. Together, they watched the street. Nothing more needed to be said.